now we'll talk about the carcass elimination process with Marilène Halin. She will present her work. There was a committee set up in 2020, and she will tell us a bit what we're up to with this issue. So Marilène Halin has a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and a master's degree in molecular biology from the University du Québec and Montreal. She started her career in the pharmaceutical industry. Since taking up her position as biosecurity advisor at the MAPAQ in 2020, she's been involved in preparing for the mass elimination of animals in the event of emergency animal health measures. Marilène? Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'll be happy to mention, as mentioned, to talk to you about what has been done in the past years with respect to the mass disposal of dead animals. So before starting, I will present what we have for mortality management for hogs. This regulation framework, this is found within the law on the Act on Animal Residues. We can have a recuperation process for compacting or other recuperation. We can also have land filling, but there are some distances to be respected, and MAPAQ also created a guide called the Guide for Management of Dead Animal on the Farm, and this guide gives some indications with respect to distances and some recommendations, for example, not using more than 500 kilograms in a same pit, and to make sure that all these pits will be at least 50 meters from another. In the past months also, when we have a surplus of non-edible meat, the producer can ask a special permission to the Minister of Agriculture to dispose of these non-edible meats in some other manner, but this manner must be provided for in the Act on the quality of the environment and its regulation. What is available right now in this Act on the quality of the environment and the regulation is incineration, which was already allowed, and landfilling on a technical landfilling site. So for the hog sector, it would be possible to send the dead animals in a technical landfilling site. So let's talk about the disposal requirements for ASF. We are talking about elimination for sick animals, but also surplus animals that could create some issues because of the closing of exports. In our scenarios, we wanted to work with a worst-case scenario because we want to plan for the worst, but we know that regarding zoning agreements could allow us to recuperate some of these activities more rapidly. The figures throughout the years, I've been working on this file for quite a while, have changed. Why? Because we are preparing ourselves for new depopulation methods. We have some partners that have withdrawn, and we are more precise in our preparation because of that. And in the light of the last figures, if we have a ratio of about 60% slaughter ratio with an abortion proportion of about the 50% for our sows. The slaughter for farm, it will be piglets 6 kilos and under. At the slaughterhouse, in one of the 5 slaughterhouses where we have humane conditions for slaughtering animals, or mobile euthanasia unit. If we use these hypotheses, we would have a scenario of depopulation and elimination that would be spread out over 22 weeks, would be a bit more for sows because we have less options for sow slaughtering. This would give us a tremendous volume of 275,712 tons of carcasses to eliminate. If we go back to the management process for piglets, I have eliminated 3 modes because they are not adapted for large volume. For example, incineration, incinerating animals, they have only small capacities. Composting as a planned form in the regulation must be in cells on concrete floor and a roof and walls, and producers using this methodology usually, well, they have planned their facilities for current mortalities. You could not add up a lot of dead animals to that. Landfilling on the farm, as I said earlier, it is only in cases of problems because we have a lot of limitations in terms of volumes in these pits. So this leaves us with two options more applicable to massive elimination, that is dismembering and landfilling and technical landfilling sites. We have contacted them a few times to see what kind of capacity they would have to accommodate us in emergency situations. The figures have changed again. Last news, the Stalimax and technical landfilling sites throughout Quebec mentioned that they could accommodate us for about 100,000 tons of animal carcasses if in any case of swine fever outbreak. So 100,000 tons still to be eliminated, for which we have no option. So with these figures, MAPAQ decided to create a committee, elimination of swine fever animal. On this committee, we invited many associations, many professionals, members of the Canadian Animal Inspection Committee and Fauna and Park Committee, member of the industries, through the AQSP, to make sure that we had all the expertise needed. The actions of this committee was to look at the literature to see what was being done elsewhere in the U.S. And everywhere. And the composting attracted us because it allows us to enhance the matter instead of only putting it in a technical landfilling site. And the Canadian agency has an expertise there because these modes have been used in cases of emergency situations for animal health issues already. What we saw in the literature, this would not help us answer all questions in terms of environmental contamination. It was a major question for us and for the environment. So what we decided to do was to have a pilot project for composting outside. It's a project that was funded 100% by MAPAQ. And all participants of the committee were able to mention their questions and concerns so as to allow us to take all the measures to make a good decision on the topic. So the Canadian Agency on Food Inspection was interested to check if eventually the virus of swine flu would be destroyed in this kind of setting. The Ministry of the Environment were worried about environmental contamination, air, production of lexivia or production of odors. The EQSP was interested in the operational aspect of all that because it's a big project and there are costs related to that. And the MAPAQ, well, our objective was wanted to eliminate a new mode of elimination, include it in our regulation to make sure that producers have a solution in case of introduction of swine flu. So that was given to a professional, a person in charge at the Institute of Research and Development, ERDA, Denis Prodvin, research professional, Marie-Michel Corbeil, they carried out this project. A tremendous team. I recommend any kind of collaboration with them, no doubt. And as you can imagine, we would have liked to test all kinds of conditions, but we limited ourselves to 6. So we had 6 group of 4 meters by 2 meters, and we decided to test the various variables, the conditioning of carcasses. So we had
de cadavres broyés. On a également
windrow. So if we had, at the basis of the windrow, if the bed was thick, more they would absorb lexivia, and we would generate less environmental contamination. So thickness of 30 or 45 centimeters of thickness. Also, we tested various structuring agents. In the literature, we saw a lot of chips that were used. And when we had contacts with product suppliers during the project, we realized that the chips were much less costly. And so we decided to include that in the project. And we were able to assess the impact of the rain on the production of Lexivia by covering half of all the windrow with a Compotex membrane, whereby we can leave the possibility for respiration in the windrow. The experimental device here, it was a project we decided to avoid any environmental contamination. There was a big membrane at each windrow to recuperate all Lexivia. We also were able to collect all Lexivia for all conditions at various places in the windrow to recuperate the leachate. To your right, we have a windrow here with the Compotex membrane just beside. For the carcasses windrow that were into pieces, we had a perpendicular. This is a coat of the windrow, 30 centimeters and 45 centimeters. Then we added the recipe that was prepared by the mixer. So we use a Vermeer mixer. We wanted to have two carbon part on one side and one part of the animal on the other side. And once the mix was made, this mix was recuperated to dispose of in the windrows. And then the windrows were covered by a biofilter of 30 centimeters of cork to limit odors. So then we asked Dr. Caroline Duchesne from Laval University to measure the bioaerosol during the mixing processes. So she had electrostatic captors in various spaces around the mixer, 5 meters, 50 meters behind, or 100 meters in the front to see if there was aerosol production. And then we tested that in labs to see if we had any DNA from the animals or any other substances that are known to be present in the animals. Same process here for windrows. And here we have complete carcasses. Precaution during the preparation of windrows, we made sure that animals were not close to each other. So when we add the carbon matters after that, it would not get inside or between them to favor decomposition. So they were one beside the other and head to tail. We also put the bigger animals. We had various sizes of animal, so they wouldn't fall off the windrow. So the result of the composting pilot project, no aerosol was detected, probably because the day of the mix, it was slightly raining, and it is known that rain can diminish the aerosols. So there was no production of aerosol. So no rain, no aerosol. So temperature and the mixed cadavers in the windrows, the temperatures 45 degrees. It is known to be to create some kind of hygiene. For full carcasses, it's a bit more complicated because it was a bit heterogeneous. And even if we tried to take the temperature at the same place, it was impossible to make the calculation at the same place in each animal. So there are some variations. It's a bit more difficult to analyze. Regarding odors, all the visits that we made on the ground, we found no problem with respect to odors. So we think that 30 centimeters of biofilters put on around the windrows was sufficient to limit problems with odors. Regarding the leachate, we have noticed no main difference between 30 and 45 centimeters at the basis. So this means that 30 centimeters would probably be sufficient. In the composting report, there are other avenues of solution to avoid production of leachate. And the full carcasses windrows, there was less leachate because the carbon ratio was a bit higher in these recipes. I did not mention it earlier. In the composting process, it's important to move the animal around. For mixed carcasses, it could be possible after 12 weeks, but for the full bodies, it was possible after 17 weeks.
It's a compost of great quality. The agronomic qualities, depending on the conditions, were quite similar, so we cannot say that a certain carbon matter was better or a preconditioning can promote a better decomposition. It's not the case. We had a reducing of E. coli levels over time, but in the windrows for full carcasses, we found large pieces of bone in the end, so we had to filter through to make sure that we could produce a compost that could be spreadable. Here we have a chart with the pros and cons of preconditioning of the carcasses. So for the full carcasses, the benefit is it produces less leachate, and we need less equipment because we don't need a horizontal grinder. But in the cons, we need to place the carcasses individually, which can be long, and we need equipment to do so. And there's a possibility of composting fewer carcasses on a given surface. Why? Because we need more structuring agents. And in the end, we need to sieve the bones. For the windrows of ground carcasses, the pros of one become the cons of the other, so we need less structuring agents, less surface, faster composting time, and we have very low discharge at the end of the process. In the cons, it was difficult to assess the proportions of structuring agents versus the carcasses on the conveyor belt, so we need a communication between the operators, and we need some sort of experience, but I have no doubt that after a couple of days, you can learn this. After that, cleaning the grinder was a bit more difficult. We need to reflect on that cleaning beforehand, and the limited availability of the crusher is limited in Quebec, which limits us. In conclusion, the pilot project allowed us to show the feasibility of this technique in the Quebec climate. We've seen no major difference between the different substrates used, and all the different conditions allowed the decomposition of the matter. The leachate present, like I said, there will be some. The important thing is to mitigate as much as possible by adding more matter or less carbon matter. And as a solution, we could increase the basting of the windrows, so the rain adds a buffer over the windrows, and we had preoccupations regarding odors and the biofit, and this 30 centimeters allowed to solve all of this. So following the results that we obtained in the pilot project, the Environment Department proposed guidelines. This is a document that's under consultation with the different stakeholders. That's why I won't show you all the conditions and the regulatory frame, but what I can say is these guidelines, so it can be directly on site, as it's the case for avian influenza currently, and also for a centralized on-site composting. That's new in Quebec. These are not things that had been done before, so we have a regulatory framework that proposes certain requirements for distances, for example. And this is a document that we will continue to work on with the Environment Department and disseminate it to all interested. So in light of this new elimination mode that we've considered and that we'll include in the regulation, we gave a mandate to the engineering firm Stantec through a public call for tenders. The mandate was to operate all the slaughter, transport of carcasses, and disposal because, yes, over the years we worked on certain aspects, on slaughtering, on elimination modes, we worked on transportation, but we needed someone to align all the pieces of the puzzle and help us, to give us cues in regarding time, regarding volume, and distribution in Quebec. And we wanted to know, we need 170,000 tons, but where would it be better to do it? We need to plan these spaces, and this is why we called Stantec for this. The project should be completed in December 2024. We'll get the report soon. The method used by Stantec is the following. So the data from the pig farms were processed in different MRCs. All the data on the number of animals that are contained in these MRCs. So we're given to one of the 5 slaughterhouses who is equipped or will be equipped to perform humane slaughtering. Regarding live animal transportation, this is not in the plan because the system currently is going well and we don't have any issues there. We have now asked them to work on the carcass transportation. We have worked before with the artisanal truckers, and they have more than 8,000 members in Quebec, and they own trucks. And in the light of the needs that Stantec identified, this association said that they could answer these needs in transportation. And for disposal, we asked them to work with the turnkey solutions. So the landfilling is happening in the technical landfills, and we wanted to find centralized sites around these slaughterhouses. So we have greater needs in Mauricie, Montérégie, and in the Lower St. Lawrence region. So to identify these centralized composting sites, we asked them to work on 2 aspects. So this is one our priority because we could give value to the matter. It has a less impact on the environment. We gave them geomatic criteria, and these are criteria that we need to finalize with the Environment Department. We gave them these criteria, and the geomatic research allowed us to find around 15 sites in each region. Following this, they worked on the drafting of a standard plan and specifications for the material reception area, the windrow location, and the row location. And this type of planning will allow us to eliminate 1,500 tons per week. So 1,500 tons of carcasses on a surface of 2 hectares per week. And during the research for suppliers, and so Stantec identified 2 limiting factors: the availability of horizontal crushers in Quebec, and the second is the availability of structuring agents. In light of these limiting factors, Stantec is proposing to compost around 60,000 tons of carcasses on a centralized site. So we have a lack of 100,000 tons, which would be dedicated to a centralized landfill. And in the same way, they performed a geomatic research according to our criteria. They drafted standard plans and specifications for the reception area, the cell location, and also the location of the leachate treatment units. Once again, the limiting factors were identified. This time it was the leachate treatments because landfilling carcasses generates a lot of leachate. And to process these, we need enormous installations that would cost a lot of money. It would be used over a small period of time, where the first years are most critical. Also, they worked on there's a limiting factor regarding the location identification. These are often private lands, so before negotiating with an individual, it's a bit more complex. So in conclusion, this allowed us to identify a new massive disposal method. So it's composting in outdoor windrows. The operational plan from Stantec allowed us to quantify the needs by region in Quebec to help us to specify our research. We also identify additional disposal sites that meet geomatic criteria, and they draw plans and specifications for centralized disposal sites to be used in composting or landfilling, and the next steps will be in the plan. So the next steps, really important. Analysis of the operational plan produced by Stantec. We will analyze this, and the goal is to work on the limiting factors. We've identified that composting is, we wish for composting. Could we work on these limiting factors that prevent us to compost a larger quantity of carcasses? And if so, can we find new suppliers, for example? After that, we'll finalize with the environment the guidelines for composting livestock in emergency situations. And the last topic that's pretty important, if we want to give more value to composting, it will be important to raise awareness and include the agronomists in our planning. Because if we want to do this, the breeders will need a agronomic support to create the windrows, and to the follow-up, and to give value to the compost. And we need the agronomists' skills to support us, and the type of follow-up that we need to do with the breeders in the future. Thank you, Marilène. Do we have a quick questions on the massive disposal? I didn't understand. For the windrows, both will be recommended? Yes, the two are possible. And the elimination of contaminated animals, it's the agency that will give approval, so they will take the temperature to decide if it's an acceptable measure. But for the humane slaughtering, these would be two options. And for the full carcasses, you have a layout of the carcasses. You put the bigger ones at the bottom. And in reality, will it be this way? So do we need to respect your method? Because in real life, we'll just do that with with machinery. Well, the full carcasses, this could be done on the breeding ground, and often it's machinery that's available there. So I see this in a smaller volume, so they can compost their carcasses in full. But everything that's grinded, it's more trouble to find a grinder, so in a centralized site, we can do more. But ideally, if we want an adequate decomposition, we should follow this protocol. If it's not the case, as Denis Potvin said, it's not a space shuttle. There are protocols that we can follow, but I wasn't in that, and I understand the process, so it's available to all. But maybe you can perform more turnarounds to activate the decomposition. There are many options to make sure that this is done properly, I think. Thank you for the presentation. This technique of windrow composting, will this be available to the producers and supervise? Because you said that this would be accessible to producers, and well, now we're talking about emergencies. This wouldn't be available for usual deaths. This is only in an emergency context. But how will we frame every producer to do this? This is why that we need to involve the agronomists, because the environment department will make this available, but we need to perform follow-up. So that someone needs to go on site to make sure it's done properly. This will be included in the guidelines that I mentioned before. But we wish for this. As Caroline said, we don't want to create an environmental catastrophe. We want to do this well and to satisfy all. Did you assess vertical crushers that are less costly and easier to operate? That's a good question. We had one pilot project, so we tested one thing, but that's an excellent question. Maybe the capacities are less and the speed is, but this could be a good option for a producer who wants to do this in-house. And this is part of the options. We don't have a crushing requirements, and the goal is to not break the crusher and make sure that the carcass is in small pieces. So that could be an option. We should take a look at this. As a personal experience, we used one in the United States with only one crusher that costs around $40,000. And in the degradation of carcasses, this created pieces this big, and after 7 or 8 weeks, we had an interesting decomposition. Yes, we went for the extreme, so full carcasses and really small pieces, but in the middle, we could have other options. Thank you for the proposition. Thank you, Marilène.